Hi guys, Miss Joelle here. I'm going to read the next part of Fuzzy Mud. We are on chapter 10. Wednesday, November 3rd, 2:26 a.m. Tamaya slept. Marshall did not. As much as Chad had tormented him, he tormented himself even more. He lay in bed, desperate to fall asleep. He knew he'd have to be alert to deal with Chad, but sleep seldom comes to those who are desperate for it. It is something that had to be eased into gently. He'd gotten in trouble for coming home so late from school. He was supposed to have looked after the twins, and when he hadn't shown, his dad had to leave work early. The only way we can afford to keep you at Woodridge is for everyone to do their part, his father had reminded him. Good, I'll go to another school then, Marshall had answered. I hate that place. It didn't make any sense to Marshall. If his parents couldn't afford it and he hated it, then why not let him go to another school? But that argument only made his parents angrier. Then, on the way back to his room, he'd accidentally stomped on the twins' Hippo Village, which had just caused more yelling. You're lucky I didn't step on you, he told Daniela. The whole thing was his parents' fault. Marshall decided his birthday was on September 29th. And back when he was 4 years old, his parents had to make the choice. Either he could start kindergarten as one of the youngest kids in the class, or he could wait a year and be one of the oldest. If they had waited, he'd be older, bigger, and stronger, and Chad Hillegas wouldn't even be in the same grade. How many members are in the U.S. Senate? That was the question Mr. Davison had asked Chad. 29? Chad had guessed. Andy was the one who'd laughed, not Marshall. How can there be only 29 senators, Andy had pointed out. There are 50 states. Right then, Marshall had known that he was doomed. Oh, I missed something. But then Mr. Davison had said, Marshall, would you kindly tell Chad how many senators there are? Right then, Marshall had known that he was doomed. He had considered giving the wrong answer, and maybe he should have, but who knows? If he had answered something like 28 or 1,000,000, Chad might have thought that Marshall was mocking him. Instead, what Marshall had done was stare down at his desk and very quietly say, 100, I guess. It was only a short time later that Chad had nearly thrown him down the stairs. We need to settle this once and for all, and you better be there, you thumb-sucking coward. Now, as he lay wide awake at 2:30 in the morning, Marshall tried to convince himself that since Chad had finally beaten him up, that he wouldn't bother him anymore. They had settled it once and for all. Except that he knew the opposite was more likely. Now that Chad had tasted blood, he would come back for more, and he would come after Tamaya too. He imagined walking to school with her. She's yammering away about Monica or Calvin Coolidge or something, when Chad grabs her hair, spins her around, and punches her in the face. Leave her alone, Marshall shouts. Tamaya was on the ground crying. Chad is about to hit Tamaya again, but Marshall grabs his arm. I said leave her alone, buttface. Chad shoves him. He shoves Chad back. A crowd gathers. Chad comes at him with all he's got, punching wildly, but Marshall holds his ground, ducking and hitting. At first, Marshall hears everyone rooting for Chad, but as the fight continues, he starts to hear a few of his old friends root for him. Get him, Marshall! You can do it, Marshall! And then, as Marshall tried to fall asleep, he imagined the fight ending in different ways. Sometimes he was the winner, leaving Chad beaten and bloody, begging for mercy. Other times Chad won, but only after a long, hard-fought battle. He envisioned himself lying on the pavement, barely able to move. Two pretty girls from his class, Andrea Gall and Laura Muskrans, kneel by his side and tell him how brave he was, and they dab the blood off of his face with a wet paper towel. Laura kisses his cheek. But even as he imagined all this, he knew it would never happen. If Chad attacked Tamaya, the best he could hope for was that a teacher would break it up before Tamaya got hurt too badly. Then maybe Chad would be expelled. And then maybe after Chad was gone for a while, the other kids would like him again. That was his best hope. And he hated himself for it because he knew it was the pathetic hope of a coward. I don't know what the right answer is for dealing with bullies. I wonder if you guys have ever had experiences with them. It's not fun. Chapter 11. Poof. Excerpt from the Senate's secret hearings. Senator Haltings. Of course, we all have great hope for a non-polluting, inexpensive alternative to gasoline, but my big concern, Mr. Fitzman, is what will happen when your man-made organisms mix with the natural environment. How will they affect plant life and animal life? And ultimately human life? We just don't know. Jonathan Fitzman. I've got that covered. Senator Haltings. The smaller something is, the harder it is to keep it contained. You can put a tiger or a grizzly bear inside of a cage, but it's a lot harder to keep a tiny microorganism from escaping. Jonathan Fitzman. It's not a problem. Senator Haltings. If you have your way, people will be filling their cars with Bioline at every gas station from Miami to Seattle. Tanker trucks will be hauling Bioline across the country. Drops will spill. Accidents will happen. Then what? Jonathan Fitzman. Look, you got this all upside down and backwards. You're all worried about ergonomics getting out, but really it's just the opposite. I'm doing all I can to keep the outside from getting in. Senator Haltings. I'm not sure I see the difference. Jonathan Fitzman. Ergonomics can't survive in oxygen. Expose an ergie to oxygen and poof. Senator Haltings. Poof? Jonathan Fitzman. It disintegrates. Poof. You don't have to worry about ergies escaping into the air. At Sunray Farm, we had to build a special vacuum-sealed hoses and tanks just to keep the air out. Okay, let's leave it at that.